So good evening. How is everybody doing? For those of you I have not met, my name is Tina Cho. I'm Professor of Chemistry and Dean of the Frank R. Seaver College of Science and Engineering at Loyola Marymount University. Welcome to Seaver Spotlight. This is our signature event featuring inspiring individuals who share their experiences as they seek to live lives of meaning and purpose, which is the hallmark of the Jesuit education at LMU. So before we proceed, I want to go over a few reminders. First, this event is being recorded and will be posted on our website at a later date. So if you do not want to be recorded, please turn off your video, your camera. Secondly, also please be sure to mute yourself to allow for the best audio experience for everyone here. I like to get a sense of the group that is with us. I know I scroll through the screen to catch as many of you as possible by asking you a couple of questions. If we were in person, I'd have you stand up, but we're going to use some technology to figure out who you all are. So take out your phones or open another browser window on your device, okay? And then type in and go to polev.com/LMU Seaver. So you're probably saying, what did she say? It's going to be in the chat. In the chat, there's going to be some instructions. Okay, so if you go to the chat, or if you just open up a browser, we're going to use an app called Poll Everywhere. And so again, go to another browser or on your phone, type in pollev, POLLEV.com/LMU Seaver. And then you'll see the very first question, which is who's in the audience? I want to know who's in the audience. So please go on to the app and answer that first question for me. I'm going to give you a few minutes. Okay, how are we doing here? So I see we've got 234 participants and we're starting to climb. We've got a majority of our folks out there, our students so far, and we see some faculty and staff, alumni starting to climb. I know there are more alums out there. So again, open up your browser or take out your phone, type in and go to pollev, POLLEV.com/LMU Seaver, and you should be able to see the first question. So answer the best that you can. I'm going to wait a little bit just to see how far we get. So should I wait until it all adds up to 235? Probably not, right? So at this point, it seems like majority of those in the audience are our students. So welcome all of you students out there. Okay, I've got a second question that's on. So please go ahead and answer the second question, which is what is or was your major? So again, here you want to, if it's a one word like I'm a biology major, you just simply type in biology. If your major is two words, then make sure you hyphenate computer science, great. So whoever wrote computer science, if you're health and human sciences, again, right? So hyphenate if it's multiple words. And so this allows me to see what all of the different expertise or major areas. I see mechanical engineering. There are a lot of engineers out here. Oh, we got, there's a little bit of a split. We've got biologists. Oh, there we go. It keeps, let's see. So biology majors, undeclared, wonderful. Electrical engineering. Wow, we're climbing on the electrical engineering. Civil engineers, math majors out there, wonderful post-bac students. We see a lot more mathematics students coming on here. So excellent. So be sure to, this is wonderful. So be sure to leave on your browser, leave the browser open because we'll be coming back to this during the presentation. So this was just to get a sense and get you back on so that we can utilize this wonderful feature later on in the presentation. So it's really wonderful to have such a diverse group in the audience. We're just so delighted that you're here with us this evening. Tonight, we're honored to have Dr. Seaver Speicher, one of my former students, share his experiences and reflections. After his talk, we've set aside some time for questions. So please type your questions in the chat function and I will moderate the Q&A after the presentation. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Seaver Speicher, a physician, systems engineer, and innovator. Dr. Speicher is the Associate Medical Director of Patient Safety Programs at Flatiron Health, a healthcare technology and services company focused on accelerating cancer research and improving patient care. He is a board-certified pediatrician and a former clinical fellow in the Division of Pediatrics, Hematology, Oncology at UCLA. As a clinical trainee, Stephen worked with UCLA Health in the development of an integrated care model for adolescents and young adults diagnosed with cancer. He worked with internal and external stakeholders to build out a standardized approach to care for patients and presented his work at local and national conferences. He also held a fellowship in the UCLA Biodesign program looking at medtech innovation in healthcare. Stephen earned his master's degree in healthcare systems engineering and a bachelor's degree in biology from LMU, and he has a medical degree from UCLA. After medical school, he completed his residency training in pediatrics at the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Seaver Speicher.
Thank you, Dean Cho. I appreciate it. And thank you to everyone for being here tonight. I just want to give, for all the current students, really a shout out to Dean Cho. You guys are in really good hands. I'm not going to embarrass her too much, but she's been a tremendous part of my journey through the years here at LMU and beyond. And so you guys are very lucky to have her here tonight. And thank you for inviting me this evening. So I'm going to go ahead and get things fired up on my screen. Second. All right. Does that look okay?
Yes.
All right. Fantastic. So I'm really excited again to be here with you guys tonight, even though it is virtual. And I do know, like Dean Cho said, that we have a very diverse group of individuals. And I'm hoping by the end of the evening that regardless if you're a student, a young alumni, or a faculty, that you can kind of walk away with something from this presentation. The title of my presentation is Innovation Amidst a Pandemic. And I hope to cover that and a lot more in our talk this evening. So what is our plan for this evening? What are we going to go through? Really what I'm hoping to do is touch on a couple of different buckets over the course of our next 30 to 40 minutes together. The first item is really targeted at our current students and maybe some of our young alumni. I'm going to talk a little bit about journeys, both personal and professional, and share with you guys my professional journey and to the career that I have today. Hoping to give a little insight into the fact that not all journeys are linear, and to try to really embrace the idea that not everything's going to work out exactly like you intend it, but I think that all things together can kind of form a really impactful and meaningful journey for everybody here. The second thing is to touch a little bit about this idea of innovation. Innovation is really this buzzword that's used in a lot of different industries. And I'm just here to tell you that first and foremost, you don't need a degree in innovation to call yourself an innovator. And I hope to inspire a little bit of this spirit of innovation in doing everything or doing things on a daily basis. And so we're going to talk a little bit through that and the idea of innovation specifically in healthcare. And then lastly, I'm going to touch on kind of bringing both of these things together. So talking about how my personal or my professional journey rather, and this idea of innovation really came to a head this last year as we approached something really remarkable in the healthcare system. So I'm going to touch on something called COVID. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, if you've been watching the news at all, but I think a lot of us are very familiar with what COVID is and the repercussions. And what I'm going to do is kind of walk through how the spirit of innovation and how collaboration within innovation was so crucial to our response at UCLA during this pandemic. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So before I get started, what I'd like to do is introduce you guys to someone, and I'm going to speak to this person as well as the rest of you. That person is on, I think you're right there. That is 18-year-old Steven. And my goal is to kind of ease some of his anxieties and probably tell him to calm down a little bit, to try to explain to all of you guys as well as this 18-year-old, that sometimes things don't necessarily go exactly as planned. But again, I think that when you kind of put together a lot of your different interests, you can form a really meaningful career and really meaningful path. So in talking to all of the young students out there, and also to young Steven, this was really my expectation. You guys are going to go through a lot of career development talks during your time at LMU and beyond, and a lot of them are going to look something like this. It's going to give you the path that you must take in order to get to a certain destination. It's going to say that in order to become a physical therapist, or in order to become a dentist, or in order to become a certain type of engineer, this is the path that you need to take. And I very much prescribed to this equation. For me, I decided at an early age, or what I thought I decided was that I wanted to be a physician. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to see patients. I wanted to live that life. And so during my time at LMU was like, okay, this is what I need to get accomplished during undergrad. This is what I need to accomplish during medical school. I need to learn my anatomy, my physiology, take the necessary exams to get to the next step. And that next step was residency and fellowship. And what do I need to do during that time to get to the next step? And that was going to finally be my career. That was going to be my 9 to 5, my consistent routine job as a physician. And what I'm here to tell all of you guys is that for me and for a lot of people, that's not necessarily how things go. And I think instead of expecting things to go in this linear manner, oftentimes it's a little bit easier to kind of embrace the idea that it may not go like this, but it may turn out better than you can have ever expected. And I think that's something that's very true for my specific career path. So instead of the expectation, here's what the reality was. The reality of my path to my career has been much different than what I anticipated. Like Dean Cho had mentioned, I'm currently working in a healthcare data and technology company called Flatiron Health. That's the Flatiron building in New York City, right behind me. And this is my logo for the company. And I'm the head of the patient safety program here. Our company creates digital products to help better care for cancer patients. And the journey for this role has been anything but linear, but I'm excited to say that I feel like I'm in a really good place working in healthcare technology, still getting to see patients and really getting the best of both worlds. So what I really thought was what was going to happen was I was going to have this very linear process. I was going to acquire degrees and I was going to accomplish certain milestones. And instead, I think things, definitely evolved and they look a little bit different. I think that this is often how I see my career path, and maybe something that will resonate with some of the students here this evening. Instead of kind of growing in this linear path, what I see is that I acquired a variety of different skill sets from the time that I started at LMU into currently today, and I'm continuing to build on those skill sets. It's those skill sets that kind of fit together like puzzle pieces, and I think those things together build on each other to kind of formulate a comprehensive set of skills that really position you to be a really successful in whatever your career passion might be. Oftentimes I didn't see what this was going to look like. I kind of had to embrace the fact that this might come together, this might not. Some of these things changed over time, some of these things evolved. But I think for me, this is really what really resonates with me. For me, it was big to be involved in clinical experience, so I wanted to make sure that I had time to do my residency and do my fellowship and actually practice medicine and really get immersed in actually taking care of patients. One aspect that I definitely didn't see coming that I'm very thankful for was this idea of systems thinking. So my time spent in my master's program here at LMU in the healthcare systems engineering program was really imperative to helping me think at a high level and really try to think about all these problems in healthcare and how to solve them most effectively. This spirit of innovation I'm going to talk about a little bit later, but this idea of how do you make change in healthcare, and in my biodesign innovation fellowship, this was something that I really tried to build and really foster, and I continue to do on a daily basis in my new career. And then this last piece was something that my time at LMU really ingrained in me. This aspect of volunteerism and this aspect of humanism, compassion. I started volunteering with a really important organization to me, the Camp Ronald McDonald for Good Times, which is a camp for children with cancer and their siblings. And even though that doesn't fit itself into my current career path perfectly, it's something that's extremely important to me, and something that I cherish. What I want to tell everybody is that I don't there's not going to be a perfect equation for all the students out there. I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly what your puzzle pieces are going to look like. Those things might change, they may evolve over time, but maybe think about this in a different way and not think about the path so linearly. So like Dean Cho said, what we're going to do is go to another poll question. So the next question is going to be looking at areas outside of your main area of study that interest you the most. So to go ahead and type these in, one word answers, not like your second major, but what are you excited about? For me, it was technology. For some people, it's art. Some people, it's media. Some people, it's public health. What are those things that really interest you? Got some people interested in psychology and sports and literature, Spanish, media, business, politics, astronomy, animation. So some really amazing interests. And I think I asked this question because I think what oftentimes people do is they try to kind of push these off as these are going to be my hobbies. I'm going to have my job, I'm going to have my career, and then I'll have these other things that are kind of my hobbies. But what I'm trying to tell you is that some of these things might not be able to translate directly to your career, but oftentimes you can find ways to build these things into the things that you do. If you're interested in politics and you're also interested in science, getting involved in healthcare policy is an amazing thing. Similarly, technology for me, being able to work at the intersection of technology and healthcare has been a tremendous thing that I'm very excited about. So this is awesome. So I'll jump back in. Cool. So that brings us to our second bucket of things that I want to go over today, and that's this idea of innovation. And I really stress that I call myself a physician innovator not because I did this innovation program, but because I really learned to I think embrace this spirit of innovation. And what I'm here to tell you guys is that I think everybody, regardless of what you're doing now, can really embrace the spirit of innovation and call yourself an innovator. There is no degree for innovator, but it's really more of a mindset. What is innovation? This idea of there being a variety of different definitions that exist out there of what exactly is innovation. And one that's always resonated with me is this idea of comparing creativity to innovation. So the definition that I really like, it states that creativity really is the process of thinking of something new. So a lot of people will consider themselves and actually be creative. They're oftentimes looking at different things in a creative way, thinking this is a problem, or I don't really like how this works exactly. Let me think of something that could be better. And that can be as simple as someone that really enjoys to cook and they're looking at a meal and they're trying to think creatively about what they can do differently, or look around at their house or their dorm room and think, what can I do to make this what can I do to change this up and make this a little bit better? What I think differentiates creativity from innovation, and why I really like this definition, is that innovation, instead of just creativity, innovation really takes this process of actually implementing something new. So it really takes the idea, the ideation, and it moves it one step forward to actually doing something about it. And I think that's what really, really inspired me personally about the idea of innovation. I like the idea of thinking of new things, but I really like the idea of actually doing something new and doing something fresh. And what I'm trying to say is that I really think that this can occur in pretty much everything that you guys do, whether it is just in cooking or in your daily habits or routines. Things that you see that are inefficient or things you don't like, if you think of better ways to do it, just do it and try those things out. I think that's where that spirit of innovation really comes into play. So why is innovation important in healthcare? Plain and simple. And I think that this has really been highlighted during the course of the last year with COVID, but the healthcare system is broken. It's fundamentally not functioning correctly. There's a lot of areas where it's, we're doing a great job and we're extremely innovative, but a lot of things that we're doing, we're not doing efficiently. And I think that as an entire field, healthcare really could benefit from people that have that spirit of innovation, and people that can approach problems with that spirit of innovation over time. So that brings us to our next poll question. And thinking about the needs of the healthcare system, what do you guys think are some of the biggest barriers to innovation in healthcare? I think this one's going to come up as a multiple choice question, but some of the options are: there's no interest in innovating in healthcare, there's no need to innovate, there's no real capable innovators, there's lack of collaboration and innovation, or there are not enough resources being used in healthcare. So I'm curious what everybody thinks. I'll give it a minute or so. We're fighting between D and E, it looks like. Awesome. Yeah, well, go ahead and keep responding. I'll tell you, the first three are definitely not the case. I can assure you that there's definitely interest. People may not, again, realize that they're interested in innovating, but a lot of people are frustrated with healthcare and want to make some changes. There's definitely the need is there. Capable innovators, I would say there's a lot of smart people working in healthcare. The answer that I'm really going with is D, that there's a lack of collaboration within innovation in healthcare. And I'm going to kind of talk about that a little bit. An interesting point to E, because it looks like a lot of people seem to think that there are not enough resources being used in healthcare. I'm here to tell you that healthcare, specifically within the United States, is one of the most, if not the most expensive areas that we spend money on across the board. So there is definitely a lot of money being poured into healthcare globally and within the United States. It may not be going to innovation, so that might be where some people got a little bit messed up with that one. But there's definitely plenty of money in healthcare, and we just need to be reallocating it to some of those innovation projects. I'll jump back into this. Thanks, guys, for participating. Cool. So yeah, so again, I really think the key to successful innovation is getting a diverse group of minds together to really help solve problems that matter. I think most people would agree that a lot of problems in healthcare are problems that matter. And I think that if we can get the right people in the right room, we can really start to solve some of those things with that spirit of innovation kind of ingrained in those thinkers. No shortage of intelligent individuals across the board within healthcare, whether it be nurses or doctors or researchers or administrators. There are some very smart people in healthcare. And I think one of the biggest barriers is really just trying to get the right people in the room at the same time. I do think that one of the biggest advances in healthcare innovation has been this realization that, and I can say this as a doctor, but that doctors really are not going to be able to make all the changes alone. We are not the ones that are in charge of healthcare. We are some of the people that are important in making decisions for healthcare, but there are a lot of really smart people, and we need to start bringing them all together, even if they don't work traditionally in healthcare, to start to solve problems within healthcare that really matter. It's going to take individuals with backgrounds in engineering, in computer science, in informatics, in business, in psychology, and all those things, in design and media, and all those things that you guys called out. Those are the people that are going to really help to inspire major change in healthcare. So that was our second bucket. And now I'm going to move on to this little guy. Never did I think there would be a day where the general population would be able to identify an electron microscopy of a viral particle. And so I think most people will be able to recognize this well into the future, which is pretty crazy. And so I want to spend the remainder of the time talking about how important innovation was to the COVID response at the hospital level. So for a little bit of context, last March through July, so right at the beginning of when COVID was really becoming much more prominent in the United States, I was still working full-time at UCLA as a clinical oncology fellow and part of my biodesign fellowship at that time. And because of my experience in my background, I was quickly pulled into a lot of the projects that were being put forward at UCLA in relation to responding to the COVID pandemic. So I just want to paint kind of the picture for those of you who weren't really aware of what was going on in March, or maybe weren't in Los Angeles or somewhere else, of kind of what the response looks like here in LA. If you can imagine the amount of misinformation that was spreading, and trying to find actually just the right data, the right information was not a problem just for the general public. It was a problem for the hospital system as well. We were learning as we were watching responses in China, subsequently in Europe, and then eventually in New York, and then in Seattle, to try to see what was going to happen as this virus eventually came to Los Angeles. It wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when, and when it got here, what was it going to look like? And we were forced to face a number of problems that we needed to solve for. And we're ultimately asking ourselves the question of how bad is this going to get in LA and how prepared do we need to be? I think it's really important to understand that hospitals prior to COVID were not set up to respond to a pandemic in this way. And this was very much a think on your feet and try to figure this stuff out as you go. So for the last poll question of the evening, what I'm gonna wanting you guys to do is, even if you're, just 19 years old, think about if you were running UCLA, you were the president of the health system, you were in charge of this hospital, and I think you can put these in priority order. But what would be the things that you're trying to focus in on right away? What is your biggest priority right off the bat? So is it being able to test and diagnose? Is it making sure that that providers have appropriate PPE? And we'll talk a little bit about PPE. Ensuring that we're ready for a surge if a surge of patients come in, or really working on the treatments and protocols to help COVID patients survive. Let's see what you guys think. Well, it looks like we're on the PPE train, followed by the getting ready for the surge, being able to get enough tests to diagnose, and then eventually working on our protocols and our treatments. This is one of those trick questions, and really the answer is, of course, it's all of the above simultaneously, and 24 hours a day running constantly. I think this is a good approach. I don't think there's any specific perfect answer for what to do first with all of this, but really at the end of the day, we were trying to do all of these things simultaneously while responding to the virus as it made its way into Los Angeles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of walk through in the next like 5 or 6 minutes, just 3 short vignettes on 3 distinct problems that we faced at the early stage of the pandemic, and how really it was this cross collaboration and this innovation within multiple stakeholders that allowed us to solve for these three particular issues. So the first that we kind of talked about was the problem with testing. And I'm sure everybody has heard about all the issues surrounding testing. A lot of people talked about the accuracy of the test and false positives, false negatives, and I'm not even going to get into the details of the test itself. I'm going to talk about that thing up on the screen right now, which is the swab. While a large group of people were trying to figure out the actual test, it became very clear to us that we were going to actually run out of swabs, not only at UCLA, but nationally. These were swabs that we did not have the ability to mass produce, and we were not producing enough. They were being used for other things in the healthcare system, and we just definitely did not have enough. We knew that in order to adequately respond, we needed to be able to test as many people as possible, as often as possible. And so we knew that this was going to be a big limitation in our ability to do so. We immediately kind of jumped in and tried to figure out, okay, how can we solve for this? So we reached out. Luckily, we were at a pretty amazing university that had amazing resources, and we reached out to pretty much every lab that was on campus and tried to find out who had 3D printers. We started to reach out to everybody in the industry to find out who had 3D printers, and then we worked alongside of our materials engineers, our designers, our clinicians, and ultimately spun out a clinical trial to test the efficacy of 3D printed swabs. We had to work with the folks at the FDA to ensure that these swabs were up to par, but we're ultimately able to print thousands of nasopharyngeal swabs in order to test patients appropriately, and started to set up community centers to be able to test those patients as well. The second main issue is that we tried to address, and the problem that we had to answer was, how can we prepare for the potential surge of patients? So we were, sitting back in LA, kind of watching what happened in Europe and Italy, watching what was happening in Seattle, watching what was happening in New York, and watching these hospital systems really get overrun and not have enough resources at all, and not even have enough beds to support the patients that they had. So we had to start to think about, how do we respond if a surge of patients come into Los Angeles? I'll tell you the initial response across the board at any hospital, and this is not the correct way to handle things, but I'm just being completely blunt and honest, is that people start hoarding. People start taking as much as they can and basically just holding on to as many resources as they can in order to make sure that if something happens, that their hospital will be equipped to take care of it. we realized pretty quickly that we had a little bit of time to start making to make some more informed decisions. So what we started to do is we started to actually look at the data. We started to actually work with our mathematicians and with our informaticists, and we started to look at how can you do mathematical modeling to look at resource allocation, kind of really examine our population density, examine which other hospitals we have available to patients, and what is the likelihood that we're going to end up really needing these resources in the event of a surge. We put together a plan for physical space. There was a plan to turn our parking garage into a into an area with a bunch of beds, and turn all of our operating rooms into ICUs. And luckily to this day, we never had that surge in Los Angeles, and so we never had to do that. But it was something that we were prepared for, and something that we would never have been able to do without the help of people in the mathematics department, people in informatics, to help us really make a better and more informed decision. And the last problem is the problem that I, spent the majority of my time actually tackling, and that's how do we really protect our employees? How do we keep our providers and our employees safe at UCLA? So one new word that I'm sure everyone is now familiar with during the course of this year is PPE, or personal protective equipment, which is essentially all of the gear that's needed by providers to help them stay safe as they're caring for COVID positive or potential COVID positive patients. And so we needed to work on how to create not only just the basic PPE, so masks and face shields and things like that, but also more advanced PPE that we've never had to create before. So, I spun off a small group that worked with a lot of different engineering groups, a really big group actually from the School of Dentistry that worked on moldings, that was able to really help us with this. Again, some of those labs that worked on 3D printing. I had a big group of medical students that was helping me to assemble everything that I needed to assemble, various designers. And then this is when we had to go into the community and go into the industry to find just the raw materials, to find that plastic that you needed that was medical grade, and to find all these different elements that we needed in order to keep our providers safe. We were able to produce tens of thousands of face shields for all of our employees, that we used that we did injection molding for over the course of a couple of months. We also produced these things called intubation boxes, which were plexiglass boxes that our anesthesiologists actually put over the heads of COVID positive patients. So they were actually able to intubate those patients without being potentially sprayed with viral particles. And then we created some of these plexiglass testing boxes, which are shown above. And this was a way to allow people to test, but have a really strong physical barrier there in case there was a chance where they would be infected by the disease. Again, all examples of ways that this spirit of innovation and this multidisciplinary approach was really key to being able to tackle these really big problems. So how do we do? So, ultimately over the course of the last 25 or so minutes, what I was hoping to get across and what I hope came across to you guys was this idea of embracing the journey. I think really the key is to decide what are those crucial skill sets that you are going to need over the course of your career, and build upon those, be amenable to changing those up, be amenable to modifying those puzzle pieces, and incorporating those things that interest you guys to really build your journey and to make it a really fulfilling career. Second is adopt that spirit of innovation. Again, this is not something you need a degree in. You don't need a degree to call yourself an innovator. And I think if you can start in just your basic day-to-day things, it becomes second nature. It becomes something where you see a problem and you want to solve for that problem and implement something new. And I think if you can and try to do that in your day-to-day life, you'll start to do it in your work as well. And I think that's a really cool skill set and something that employers will find very valuable going forward. And lastly, but certainly not least, COVID has really shed light onto the perils of healthcare. It's shed light onto how broken our healthcare system is, and how much of a need there is for multidisciplinary approaches to really big problems. I think if nothing else, this is a very exciting time to be in the healthcare field. I think that there's a understood need. I think that we're accepting, help from a lot of different stakeholders. And I think that together we can kind of start to build a much more functional system. So that's kind of what I had for this evening. I'm going to take some questions. I know Dean Cho is going to go ahead and moderate that, but thank you guys again. This was really fun, and I hope to connect with some of you and hope that this was informative in some capacity.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Stephen, for the great presentation, sharing your experiences, your thoughts, reflection. It's so important. I think what you shared with the group is this importance of lifelong learning, and that's what the pathway that you're sharing with us. And really the second point, really about bringing together experts from various different disciplines in order to really impact innovations. So thank you for that. At this time, I'm going to ask the audience to submit questions on the chat, and I'm going to do my best to read through it as fast as I can, and then I'm going to actually ask you to ask the questions. So if you have a question, first of all, go ahead and submit that on the chat, and then I will actually call you by name. And at that point, if you wouldn't mind, unmute yourself and ask the question. Does that work? So let me do a quickie look here. This is harder than I see. So I might need to get some help here. Let's say. I'm not sure I understand. That's just my Siri going nuts here. Let's see. How about Raul Rodriguez?
Hi, yeah. I don't know if you can see me.
There you are, Raul.
Hi, yeah, I'm just interested on how you collaborate with other departments. Is there like a project leader and everyone goes to them, or do you have like meetings with them, things like that?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think that what I learned is that sometimes it takes you just reaching out and asking for tips and collaboration and just asking people what their thoughts are on things. And I think that you'll be surprised at how ready people are to help out. I do think there's a very important part of having someone as kind of the true project leader. I think when you're thinking through kind of big projects, you definitely need someone that's going to really own just the logistics of making these projects happen. But I think to start those conversations and to start that collaboration, just have those kind of more organic conversations. Talk to, whatever your major is, talk to people in different majors about a problem that you're having, and you'll be very interested in kind of the solutions that they come up with and things that you may not ever have thought about. So start that way, but then eventually I think it's important to have someone that really kind of leads that project management piece.
Thank you.
Thank you. How about Emmanuel Matias? Please unmute and ask your question.
Hey, Stephen. So yeah, you definitely have a really interesting career path, as you mentioned. So I was kind of wondering if you could talk about a time after you graduated from LMU and you were torn between two different paths, and then like what decision you made and like what your reflections are on that decision, or I guess kind of just talk about what you were feeling at that moment.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think it's so much easier to talk about it in hindsight and be like, oh, of course I knew all along what I was going to do. And I think that's not the case in whatsoever. I think the thing that comes to mind the most for me is actually the decision to go back to school and get my master's degree. I knew that I knew I kind of needed another skill set to really kind of round things out. And I had toyed with the idea of getting a business degree and a public health degree, and at what point to do that. And I thought about it in the middle of medical school, and ultimately waited until I was a little bit more, embedded in my residency and fellowship, and still was thinking through kind of what degree to actually go back and get. And I think taking the time to make that decision, it's such an important decision, and asking a lot of different people and kind of weighing through the different options is really important. For me coming back to LMU and doing the master's degree in healthcare systems engineering, it was a series of conversations, first with Dean Cho, and she kind of, had me talk to Bo, and just things started to move, and it was really just following what I was excited about. For me, what Bo was talking about with this program was really different and new, and it, I wasn't really interested in finance per se, and I didn't want that business degree. So it was kind of following my gut instinct when it came to certain things like that. But all that to say, those are some of the more difficult decisions. And just be honest with yourself and what you're truly interested in, and just kind of realize that everything comes with risk, but if you're passionate, you're excited about something, I think things, tend to work out for the most part.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. How about Carolyn T?
Yeah, hi. So I was wondering what you guys kind of have learned, like from the coronavirus that you're going to implement with future pandemic protocols.
That's a great question, Caroline. I think that when the dust settles with COVID, I think that health systems that responded to this are, I think they owe it to themselves to really take a step back and think about how they will handle the next one. Not, again, not if, but when another pandemic comes along, how do we take the lessons learned and how do we really grow from that? As far as what we learned specifically, I think just having having everything planned out, definitely more so than we had it planned out for this, is going to be really imperative. I think that while the next pandemic, and I trust me, I hope that it's not in any of our lifetimes to this extent, but while the next pandemic is inevitable, and I'm sure it will be different and it will be transmitted in a different way, there are certain things that we can learn and certain things that we can adopt to the future of how we deliver care that I think will be really important, and how we test and how we protect and how we also how we take a stand in making sure that we're the individuals that are putting forth the information to the public. I think that should be something that healthcare professionals and scientists learn from this process of how to be more involved in that process going forward.
Thank you. How about Brian McDonald? Brian?
Oh, I was just wondering, what aspects of the healthcare system, in your experience, have you found to be the most broken?
It's a great question, Brian. Oh goodness. I'm gonna try to I'll try to keep it brief. I think let's start with what I think is not broken, because I think that's a little more inspiring than talking about what is broken. I think at the end of the day, the people that work in healthcare are fundamentally good. I think that the people that work in healthcare are trying to better the lives of others, and I think that passion for helping others is sincere, and I think that it's real. I think that it's not the people; it truly is the system, and that's something that I've learned firsthand, and also in kind of diving into the master's program here at LMU. But it's just that, we're not set up for efficiency. We're not set up to ensure that there's closed loops in the system. There are just so many systems inefficiencies, and as someone that's now working in healthcare technology, I would say that when I look at what is the biggest contributor, I think it's our lack of adoption of healthcare. I'm sorry, a lack of adoption of technology. And I think that as we start to thoughtfully incorporate technology into the healthcare system, we're going to be definitely more primed to have a more robust and stronger system. But I think definitely don't take away that the healthcare system is so broken that you shouldn't trust doctors. You should definitely trust physicians and scientists, and the people are good. The people are well-intentioned. There are parts of the system that I think definitely need improvement, but that's why we need a lot of really good thought leaders to come and help tackle these problems.
Excellent. How about Charlotte? Charlotte Hariri.
Hi. So you spoke a bit about innovation today, and I just wanted to see your perspective in a physician during the pandemic at a hospital. What are your thoughts on the coming vaccine and possible percent efficacy of the vaccine?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm excited about the vaccine. I'm excited about all vaccines. I'm a pediatrician, so I think I'm always excited about vaccines. I think, and keeping all politics out of the talk in general, but I think that we definitely can trust the FDA process for approval of a vaccine. I think it's going to be important for everybody to find out exactly who has approved and who has looked at the vaccine and who has made sure to vet that process. And as long as we stick to our traditional process for approving a vaccine through the FDA, I feel very confident in that. It's actually one of the few things that we do really well is our vetting process for new drugs and new vaccinations. We've definitely expedited this, but I think that we're on a good trajectory to have something coming, relatively soon, and to definitely trust that. I think that the vaccine really is our best opportunity to get out of this in a relatively short fashion, and getting back to some sense of normalcy. So I'm very excited for the prospects of it. I've taken a look at all the data from the different clinical trials where it's available, and it all looks very good. And again, I have high confidence in the FDA approval process for vaccines traditionally. I think it will be important to take a look at whatever comes out, and to make sure it's gone through the same process as every other vaccine has.
Excellent.
Thank
Well,
you.
there's a lot of questions here, so I'm going to have to I'm trying to be fair and go down the list here. How about Atithi Multani?
Yeah, hi Stephen. So you touched a bit on innovation, and I think that today's students are tomorrow's doctors, engineers, mathematicians, and so on. And given the pandemic, majority of the students are at home all day, every day, in that same room, doing the same things on the computer screen all day. So do you have any tips to, just kind of like spark or keep in mind for like innovation, like ideas, I guess, or any words of advice for that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think it's challenging being at home. I think it's challenging for everybody, and specifically trying to think about the idea of innovating, because you're thinking about doing stuff and you need people and you need collaboration. But I think kind of like I said, I think that there's the ability to innovate in everything that you do in your daily life. I think that even mundane things can be opportunities for innovation. And I think that even if you just start with your mundane day-to-day activities, it will spark that spirit. And then that spirit then translates into the next time you have a group project, and how do you innovate and make that more exciting. I think there's always an opportunity to do that. And I think that like I said, kind of gathering around a group of not like-minded individuals and trying to solve problems, I think is something that's the kind of the best way to do it. In a remote world, it's much more challenging. I'll tell you, even from a professional setting, my company is having a much more challenging time innovating effectively when we're not all together. There's something about being in the same room that will never be replaced, and I'm excited for the day when I can get back with my coworkers and the software engineers and kind of help them build out really interesting and new projects. But I think that work on those ideas. I think the first step to innovation in general is identifying problems and identifying things that don't work, and start looking around, start keeping a log of things that are broken and to be frank, just bother you, and then that you want to fix, and think through that mental process of how would I fix this, and then if it's feasible, start fixing it. I think it's learning to take that step from creativity and just that ideation phase to actually doing. And I think that if you start to do it, it just becomes more natural.
Excellent.
Thank you.
There's a lot of great questions here, Stephen. How about Isabella's question? Isabella Bareford, can you please?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. I was just curious what the next steps the healthcare industry is going to take regarding COVID, especially with the holiday season coming up. And then I know you work in the pediatric field. So I was just curious, like with some schools going back, some schools not going back, just your thoughts on that in general.
Yeah. Gosh, if I knew the answer to that, I think I would be, probably, I don't know, in a different place right now if I had all the answers. What the next steps that we're taking, honestly, I feel like the actual hospital system, so the hospital systems like UCLA and Cedars-Sinai and USC and the local ones, and then all of the hospital systems are really just trying to maintain. We're taking a look at, I think they have a pretty good sense of how to deal with the disease and how to quarantine patients appropriately and test, and I think we're doing a pretty good job of that. I think it's still just being very, very cautious about monitoring our cases and making sure that we're not starting to surge. So I think the actual hospitals are in kind of like a maintenance phase, if you will. I think the next step for the kind of global healthcare industry really gets to that vaccine piece and trying to figure out, okay, when we have a vaccine, what, what's going to be the process of how to get that available to the, the most vulnerable first, and then eventually to everybody, and making sure people feel comfortable with it. I think that there's a big fear that people aren't going to feel comfortable taking the vaccine, and so I think that that's going to be the thing that the healthcare industry really needs to do well, is market this vaccine and make sure people feel extremely confident that this is not a rushed vaccine, and that we should have confidence that this is a really good vaccine. As far as, from the pediatrics lens, I will tell you, and I finally feel confident saying this, that that children in general do very well if they do contract this disease, and I think everybody is fairly familiar with that. But the problem is that they're still the ones going back and giving it to older adults that are a little bit more vulnerable. So with children going back to school, there is definitely a hesitation amongst a lot of people for that specific reason. And then I think the big question becomes, how and when do we start vaccinating kids? The thing that you'll learn about pediatrics in general, if you go into healthcare, is that we do a lot of testing on adults and we very rarely test children. So children will not be the first ones to receive this vaccine, and understandably so. When and how to start getting kids vaccinated is going to be a big question across all of healthcare.
That's a great question and a great answer. How about from Sad Heat Fan?
Hi. So, to address your point about the healthcare. So, in previous classes that I've taken, we've talked about countries that have different ways of doing it, Japan and Germany, who have free healthcare. But obviously, the thing that comes with it is that being a doctor it doesn't have as much prestige to it, and they deal with a lot of debt. So is there a country that you know of that has a model healthcare system, or is there really no such thing for that, honestly?
That's a good question. I would say there really is no perfect system for every single country. Every country is different. The biggest problem, I think, with the healthcare system in the United States is that we're very deeply rooted in the current way that we deliver care. So trying to revert to a way of delivery like they do in other countries with universal healthcare, it's challenging. And I think that there are a lot of people that still think that we should push through and try to do that. And there's pluses and minuses to pretty much every different system of delivery of care delivery. I will say, just to not rag on the US too much, I don't think that there is a perfect healthcare system out there. I think that we still do a tremendous job of creating that. We really do an amazing job with drug development and testing development, and there are some things that we do very, very well. But there's no doubt that the actual way that we deliver care needs to be changed in some capacity. Figuring out what that looks like is going to be a iterative process. I think we made a tremendous step with the Affordable Care Act, and I think that will continue to evolve and continue to build. And I think we're getting there, but it's going to take some time. And I think what we need to do is take a look at all the different countries and what they do, and then what can we take away from them, and what do we have to think through ourselves.
Thank you.
Great. I'm going to pick one here. It's a very long question, but it looks like there's two people asking it. So I'll ask Megan and Claire.
There's a lot of context to our question, which is why it looks so long, but the question itself is not that long. I have been thinking a lot about the hierarchical structure of healthcare that leads to collaborative barriers, like people using a degree as a gatekeeper. You have to have this level of a degree to bring something that's useful to a team. How do you think that we can overcome that hierarchy to acknowledge that people of all degree and skill levels who come from all different paths can bring skill and expertise to the problems that we're facing?
Yeah, that's a great question. You pick up on something that's really difficult to tackle in healthcare, and that's the hierarchy that exists. I think without being ageist by any means, I think the younger generation of doctors are much better at, or the younger generation in healthcare is much better at collaboration, but there's still a hierarchy within that structure. I think that it really is going to take some really strong leaders at every, if you're a nurse, just some really strong-willed nurses that are going to get themselves in there and make change to start to get people thinking. I'll tell you that currently the CEO of the UCLA health system is a nurse with an MBA. And she is, she's one of the first female nurses that's ever run a major health system like UCLA. So I think that is starting to change. I think that in my biodesign program currently, there's a couple of nurses, there's a couple of people with, design degrees. I do think that there's a wave of individuals within healthcare that are embracing, the different viewpoints and different vantage points that are so important. But how to break that hierarchy, other than, the best way to do it is to just, get out there and really kind of prove that they're highly capable and they should be in the room making decisions. And I do think that wave is coming. And I think that will be hopefully more present with younger generations of physicians that are coming in and have less of the ego that some of the older physicians, again, without being ageist. That's just kind of my interpretation of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
This is great. Okay, so I've just been told that we've got only one more minute, so I will close up. I just can't thank you enough, Stephen, for such a great presentation and the wonderful ways, thoughtful ways that you've answered these questions from our community. So, and I also want to thank all of you for participating. This concludes our fall 2020 Seaver Spotlight. Again, thank you so much, Stephen, and all of you, and good night, and be well, and come back for our spring Seaver Spotlight. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night,
you very
guys.
much.
Thank you.